this idea, well, I was born on the same day, it's only seconds later. You know, that's kind of, as a person, as a man, as a human being, that's what I would be thinking. Like, why does he get all of it? I was just a second late. If you have your Bibles with you, if you will open up to Hebrews chapter 11, and we're going to start in there because this is where we're taking all of our God's Hall of Heroes from, is Hebrews 11. So understanding what is being said here about Jacob is very, very important. So we're going to be in Hebrews chapter 11, and it will be verse 21. And Hebrews talks a little bit more about Abraham and Isaac than it does Jacob. But in verse 21, it says, by faith Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. So that's where Jacob's name comes up in Hebrews. So that's how he makes it into God's Hall of Fame in there. All right, so we need to understand who Jacob is. So just to kind of test your Bible knowledge, who can give me one fact or two facts that you may know already about Jacob? He was a mama's boy. Okay, I appreciate that. I mean, you could take that from reading that. These kind of stuff you learn when, early on in Bible class. What else about Jacob? What's something else that's, pretty unique about him? He knew how to run. Yeah, okay. He did know how to run. What else? He wrestled with God. He had two names. He wrestled with God. He had two different names. What else might have been different that we take from his stories? Anything? All right, well, good. Now we have a basis to start. We got lots of information then. So open up your Bibles to Genesis chapter 25, and that's where we're going to start. That's where we're going to see Jacob coming into the picture. Jacob and Esau coming into the picture. Who here is a twin? Is there any? Are you a twin? So you can relate to this. Because this is hard to relate to, and I was reading through this one. First of all, if you've read all the way through and you've read the whole story of Jacob, it reads like an Old Testament soap opera. Like the stuff that takes place. It's like, oh, I just can't even believe the things that are happening. But it's hard to understand Jacob completely if you don't understand that he is a twin, that he's born, and then understand the customs and rituals of the Old Testament and the things that they did and birthrights and all that, how it all plays out, and have this deeper understanding of Jacob and his personality. So if you go to Genesis chapter 25 and verse 19, and there's a lot of verses, so I'm just going to read a little bit here. But this is the account. So starting in verse 19, it says, this is the account of Abraham's son Isaac. So this is all talking about Isaac, but it's still bringing Jacob into the picture. It said, Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethel, an Aramean from Paddan Aram, and sister of Laban, the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. The Lord answered his prayers, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The babies jostled each other within her, and she said, why is this happening to me? She went to inquire of the Lord. So, one, you got to know he's a twin. And two, the rivalry that he had with his brother was taking place in the womb before they were ever born. And obviously, it happened in such a way that Rebecca's like, what's going on? Like, so she's noticing it. She's like, these two babies, they're babies, and they're fighting. Why is this taking place? And then the Lord answers her. And I thought this was an amazing answer, and it really drives forward what she does and later on with her son. It says, 2 nations are in your womb. That's what the Lord tells her. These 2 babies in your womb are 2 nations. All right? And 2 peoples from within you will be separated. So now 2 nations, separated people. All right, one will be stronger than the other. That's what he says. And then it goes on, and this is why, later on she does what she does, but it says, and the older will serve the younger. Well, what is the tradition of the time? Although we don't have Mosaic law yet, and we don't have what actually Moses writes about the firstborn son, but what would be the typical happening? The birthright. Right? So the firstborn is birthright. Well, think about this for a second. They're twins. So they're born on the same day, right? So isn't that interesting? Now, it's only by, what, seconds, right? Not even seconds, because when we read further, we see that when the babies are born, that's right, but what happens here? What happens when Esau comes out? Well, I don't even have to read it. What happens? So Jacob's name means heel, okay, and that's why they named him Jacob, was because when they're being born, Esau comes out and he's redheaded, I mean, got to be an odd-looking child in the Middle East, a redheaded child, and all of a sudden you see there's a baby hand grabbing onto Esau, pulling him back in because he wants to get out first, right? So what's interesting about that, when we think about birthrights and we think about, the oldest child, how complicated it must have been with twins that are born within seconds of one another, right? And that kind of leads, and that's what I got from it, leading into, okay, Jacob's personality and his character and who he was this constant rivalry and this idea, well, I was born on the same day, it's only seconds later. That's kind of, as a person, as a man, as a human being, that's what I would be thinking. Like, why does he get all of it? I was just a second late. Look, I'm grabbing a hold of it. I'm there with them. So this happens, and he grabs him. So, some time goes by and going on. So if we just start in, go to verse 27, it said, the boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was a quiet man staying among the tents. All right, so we know Jacob was a quiet guy. Somebody said he was a mama's boy. He was a quiet guy. He stuck around the house. He didn't really go out hunting a whole lot. Let's see, and Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Again, there we see the divisions that's taking place. So growing up in a household where, one, your mother's probably telling you that you're going to be the ruler, you're the one that's going to take over because he's at home with mom all the time. And there's obvious division within the home because dad loves Esau and mom loves Jacob. So it's got to be some friction that takes place, and there's got to be that friction that's constantly taking place there. So understanding how he grew up from the very beginning leads to us understanding his character a little bit better as well. So Genesis chapter 25, I was in verse 27. All right, so we read, the boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was a quiet man staying among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once, when Jacob was cooking some stew, and this is an important part of the story here, was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country, famished. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished." This is also why he was called Edom. Jacob replied, "First sell me your birthright." So here we go. So Esau's dying of hunger, right? He comes in, and this seems kind of jokey, right? Like he's just joking around. He's like, "I'm dying of hunger. I really need to eat." And he's like, "Well, if you want my food, you're going to have to sell me your birthright." Now think about all the friction that had taken place. I wonder if this was the first time that he had made this offer. I wonder if he hadn't asked him before to sell me your birthright. If this wasn't a conversation that was continued. But it sounds silly. Let me trade me the birthright, the inheritance of my father, all this stuff for this little bowl of soup. So he says, "First sell me your birthright." And he says, "Look, I'm about to die." Everybody says, "I'm starving to death. I'm about to die. I'm about to die if you don't feed me." Well, what's funny, he says, "Look, I'm about to die." Esau said, "What good is your birthright to me? If I'm dead, what good is that birthright," right? So, but Jacob said, "Swear to me first. Swear to me first that you'll give me your birthright if I give you this little bowl of lentil soup," right? And so then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank, and he got up and left. And the scripture says, so Esau despised his birthright. So this was a legal transaction, right? I mean, whether it was joking or not, he truly gave up his birthright. I mean, he was willing to give it up because it caught him at a weak moment. Yeah, well, maybe. That's possible. I mean, have you ever been so hungry that you made a bad decision? Yeah, I guess so. So what we can learn from that, Jacob is very good at manipulating. Yeah, he's been really good. He's much like his uncle or his mother in a sense, which we'll read about a little bit later on. They're pretty good. And you see how the story kind of comes around. But now we're starting to understand Jacob's character a little bit, right? He's a second born. He wants the birthright. They struggle back and forth for years. And then finally he has this opportunity where he's like, it seems kind of jokey, but he gets this opportunity and he's going to take it. I want that birthright. I want it for myself. He's always been at Esau's heel, so to speak. Right? And here's his chance. This is what he's taken. All right, any questions? Any comments? Am I going the right direction? All right. All right, so some time goes on, and then you can skip right over to Genesis chapter 27. And this is talking about Jacob getting Isaac's blessing. So not only is he wanting the birthright, he's wanting the blessing as well, right? And so there's this plan that takes place, right? And so when Isaac was old and his eyes were weak so that he could no longer see, he calls for his son Esau. I'm not going to read all the scripture, but because I could tell you the story kind of going down the line. But he calls for his son Esau to come in, and he has this conversation with him, telling him, hey, I really like the food that you go out and get me. I love wild game. I mean, that's why he loved Esau. He loved that he could go out and hunt and bring him back this tasty food. So he tells him, go out and get this tasty food for me, bring it back to me, and I'm going to give you my blessing. Right? Well, mom overhears it. Rebecca overhears this taking place. And as soon as Esau gets out of the house, she goes to Jacob and she says, hey, Jacob, I got this plan. I heard your father telling your brother to go out and get this fresh game and bring it back, and he would give the blessing. So she tells him to go out and get two of the best goats that they have, and to kill those best goats and bring them back. And she was going to prepare them for him to take those to his father. And that's what he does. They prepare the food. He takes it, and he's like, how is he going to know? He's going to know it's not me because my brother's super hairy. I mean, that's really what the response is. He's a hairy guy. So they come up with this whole plan to trick him. And they go in, and they give him the food. And he even says, he's like, my son, you sound like Jacob, is what he says. You sound like Jacob, but you're hairy like Esau. And he says, are you really my son? He says, yeah, I'm really your son. And he ends up giving the blessing to Jacob. And a short time after that, now Esau comes in the house. He's got the fresh prepared food. He's taking it to his father. Father, I have this food for you. It's delicious, the food that you wanted. And he says, well, who was the guy that was here earlier that tricked me? I already gave my blessing to him. I blessed him, his family, his descendants, and now he's going to rule over you. That's what he tells him. You're going to have to deal with this now. They tricked me into it. You're going to have to deal with it. So now Jacob has basically stolen the birthright and the blessing of his father to take over the nation. But we forget how close he was, to being the firstborn, right? We know that's why we know that he reaches out and grabs his brother's heel, because he was right there on the verge. But through all of this, he's kind of taken it. And after reading all that, I was kind of like, why did he make it in the Hall of Fame? Why did he make it here where his faith? And it's because despite all of this, when we read about him and Joseph and later on, we see that how strong his faith has actually grown over that period of time. But yeah, so now he has the blessing, he has everything, and who knows what happens next? I don't want to be the only one telling the story. What happens next? So Jacob now has stolen the blessing. He has the birthright. He has it all. What is Esau's response? He's angry, but what is he? I mean, he's angry to the point of saying that he's going to do what? He's going to kill him. He's like, I'm going to kill my brother. He took my birthright. He swindled me out of that. He's taken my father's blessing. It basically means that Esau is nothing anymore. He's taken away everything from him. He's grown up thinking he's the firstborn, that he's going to be the one to take it all, and he's the one that has the birthright, even though God had already told Rebecca that wasn't going to happen. Right? And they probably have a lot of tension knowing these things back and forth. Everything's taken from him. His whole identity of who he was going to be is gone, just like that. Now he's serving his younger brother. Imagine as a twin or even as a sibling, when the younger of the two, gets everything, and the oldest one is like, what about me? I was here first. In this instance, it was huge because it's the whole world essentially. I mean, you think about, we look at it like, okay, it's small because it's just this little country, right? But then that was the whole world. It was everything. And so this was huge for this to take place. So that's what Esau says. He says, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill my brother.
Favors the youngest anyway.
That can happen. That's possible. Absolutely. It's funny. I don't know if you've ever read the story of Alexander or seen anything that documented on the story of Alexander, but it's very similar to that. Alexander's mother was much like that. She's she was always trying to get her son in power. And that rang true in a lot of the kingdoms. They, especially with multiple wives, they always wanted their son to be the next one in line, and they did a lot of things, a lot of nasty things to try to get their son up front and put them in the line. So anyway, so Esau says he's going to kill his brother, and mom does what? Mom's like, all right, go back to my hometown, right? And hide out there. You can go to my brother, and you can find wives, right? And so that's what happens, is that that Jacob takes off, right? And he flees to Laban, and Laban is his uncle. It's his mother's brother. So if you go to Genesis, if you're still in Genesis chapter 7 or 27, we're going to go to verse 41 and start from there and just read a little bit about him fleeing. So starting in verse 41, it says, Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. He said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are near, then I will kill my brother Jacob. Once my dad's gone, that's it. I'm getting rid of this guy. Look what he's done to me. When Rebekah was told what her older son Esau had said, she sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, your brother Esau is consoling himself with the thought of killing you. He's making himself feel better by thinking about murdering you because of what you've done. All right? Now, then, my son, do what I say. Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him for a while until your brother's fury subsides. When your brother is no longer angry with you and forgets what you did to him, I will send word for you to come back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day? Mom's not taking any responsibility here. You did this to him. It wasn't that I overheard the conversation and I came and whispered in your ear what you should do. Like, you did this and now he's coming after you, right? And she doesn't want to lose them both. So then Rebekah said to Isaac, I'm disgusted with living because of these Hittite women. If Jacob takes a wife from among the women of this land, from Hittite women like these, my life will not be worth living. Going into chapter 20, it says, Isaac called for Jacob and blessed him and commanded him, do not marry a Canaanite woman. So again, she's tricking Isaac here by telling Isaac that, I don't want my son to marry any of these women. I want him to go off over here. She's not giving him the whole story. So Isaac tells Jacob, go at once to Paddan Aram, to the house of your mother's father, Bethel. Take a wife for yourself there from among the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers until you become a community of peoples. May he give you, your descendants, the blessing given to Abraham, so that you may take possession of the land where you now live as an alien. The land God gave to Abraham, the land that God gave to Abraham. Then Isaac sent Jacob on his way, and he went to Paddan Aram to Laban's son of Bethel, the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, who was the mother of Jacob and Esau. All right, so she tricks him. Jacob's going to take off. She's kind of led Isaac, the father, into believing, that this is what needs to take place, and so he, hey son, I want you to go over here because I don't want you to marry any of these women. I want you to go over there and find a different wife. And what's interesting is they're saying, basically go marry your cousins. I mean, that's what's taking place. That's why I say soap opera. Look at all that's taking place. Hey, all the lies and deception leading down this path, and hey, go marry your cousins over there. So while he was on the way, right, Jacob has this dream at Bethel. Who knows about the dream of Bethel? Who could tell me? Who remembers that dream? Some people call it the Jacob's ladder, is what I hear sometimes. Yeah, I didn't see a... The ladder going up to heaven, okay. Yeah, and that's why he sees this stairway, the stepway going up to heaven, right? Right, and what is it actually? I want to read exactly what it says there, because it definitely pushes to his character, right? So he takes a stone, right, and he puts it under his head to sleep on. I don't know what kind of pillow he was thinking. It's a rock. Anybody ever put a rock on your head and sleep under it? That's what it says he did. And he lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. I will give you your descendants, the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offerings and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. What's Jacob's name become? Once he gets, I'm skipping ahead, but what Jacob's name changes. becomes Israel. And if you understand that his name changes, this verse comes into light just a little bit more, because Israel becomes Israelites, becomes a nation of peoples. God says this is a nation of people that will rise up because of you, and we see that today. I mean, it's directly, and it says, "I'll also give you back this land." All these things, all this stuff that's being spoken to Jacob, all this is all prophesied that's going to happen, that has already happened. We can read it and say these things they took place. We've seen them. We read about them historically. They've taken place. This promise that God has given to him. So when Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it." He was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place! There is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set up a pillar and poured oil on the top of it. He called the place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. Can anybody tell me where that's at? The city of Luz, or Bethel. In the New Testament, it would be called what? What? Bethlehem. That's what it would become Bethlehem. So where he laid his head down, where he had this dream, where he's saying the gateway to heaven. Think about it, angels descending, going up and down. The gateway to heaven is in this place, in this city called Luz, which they named Bethel, which became Bethlehem. And then we know where our Savior was born. The gates of heaven, the city that he called the gates of heaven. Is that interesting? And we don't think about that, and then we go way down the line, like, oh yeah, look how that connects together. Look how Jacob connects to Christ, how Jacob connects to Jesus, how that place connects, right? And I think we skip over it a lot. So then Jacob made a vow saying, "If God will be with me and watch over me on this journey I'm taking, I will get and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I safely return to my father's house. Then the Lord will be my God, and this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house, and all of that you give me, I will give you a tenth." All right, so there we go. So Jacob's already starting tithing. He's gotten the land. God said, "This is the land I'm going to give you. This is where the gateway to heaven is." It's amazing because he doesn't know that's where the Savior's going to come through. But he's like, "All right, I'm going to set up a pillar. If you'll be with me, you'll take care of me. I'm going to give you a tenth of all that I have in my house." All right, so any questions, comments about that? No? Wow. Okay. I'm trying to get as much, and there's so much on Jacob, like we could be here for 2 or 3 weeks studying Jacob. Yes, sir.
Beginning, when Isaac's wife, Rebecca.
Yep. Yeah, Isaac's wife.
She said she went to speak to the Lord.
Yeah.
Do you know in those days where she would go?
Where she would go to speak to the Lord?
She didn't go there.
Well, if we were talking about historically speaking, they would have gone to the mountain, or there would have been a place set up for her to go that she would have went.
The turmoil, the plan was laid down for her.
Yeah.
And then no matter what she did, the plan took place. So God was
Yeah.
with her in the plan.
Oh yeah.
All the way.
Oh yeah, yeah. She was God was working through the whole thing. What's funny is when you look back at it and you understand the entirety of the Scripture, you could see that although that some of the things seem nefarious or selfish or self-centered, or some of the ways that they responded or acted, but Rebecca was doing what she did out of faith. That's really what she was doing. You read through, you could see, and even though it's kind of like, I don't know, that doesn't sound right, but God had spoke to her. It wasn't like she had just come up with this on her own. Like she had just sat down one day and was like, "All right, the firstborn, I don't like him. Esau's not my favorite. I don't want him to be in charge." The Lord had spoken to her and told her that her younger would overtake the elder, and that from both of them would come 2 nations. And their 2 nations did come out of that. You have the Israelites and the Edomites, and that's Esau's nation was the Edomites. So 2 nations did come out, and they did battle. They were constantly, at each other, So, what God told her came to be. So I can say, oh yeah, well, she kind of manipulated the situation. She kind of manipulated Isaac and all that. But God said this is what was going to take place. So regardless of what she did, what the Lord had said was going to take place took place. All right. Anybody else? All right, so what happens next? Jacob arrives in Paddan Aram, right? He gets there and he starts talking to everybody, and he starts telling them who he is and where he came from. And finally, his uncle, he hears about his nephew has come into town, right? And he runs out to embrace him and kisses him, and he brought him into his home. And Jacob told him all these things, and Laban said to him, "You are my own flesh and blood." So I'm assuming that he says he told him all these things. Jacob let go and told him everything that was happening. Esau's trying to kill me. I took his birthright. I took the blessing. And the Lord, my mom, or the Lord told my mom this, and this, and it went through this whole thing. And Laban's like, you know what? Hey, you're my flesh and blood. You can stay here. You can be with me. I'll take care of you. Right? So then Jacob stays with him for about a month. And it says that if you, going into, let's see, verse 15, it says, Laban said to him, "Just because you are a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing?" Right? So he's saying, look, just because you're related to me doesn't mean you need to break your back and not get paid. I'm willing to pay you. And says, tell me what your wages should be. So he's like, hey, all right, so you're going to work for me. I want you to tell me how much you want to work for me. Right? Now, he doesn't say he wants any money. He says, now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel was lovely in form and beauty. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, I will work for you for 7 years in return for your younger daughter Rachel. Well, that seemed like a good deal, right? And you guys, most of you know that story, right? He goes and he's going to marry him, but he gets tricked, right? He gets tricked, and he ends up marrying the younger sister Leah, right? And he's still got to work for 7 years to work this off. Most of the commentaries say that the Laban was a conniving man for what he did. But what's really interesting about this is he comes back and says, traditionally speaking, you got to marry the older before you can marry the younger. But what's really funny about that is it's a lesson to him, right? Because what happened? He jumped ahead and stole the birthright of his brother, stole the blessing of his brother, and now he's upset that somebody did it to him. Payback, right? And who knows? Laban, he knows the whole story, right? This is his nephew. He heard about this. That he knows what was really going on. And maybe in his mind he thought, this young kid, look what he did. I'll get him to work for me for 14 years over 2 daughters. And nobody will think anything of it because look what he did.
Really did it to trick him. He did it because the oldest should go first.
Yes, he did it because it was traditional, but he didn't. He was quiet about it. He wasn't really upfront with him about what was going to take place, right? So he did. He didn't trick him, but he didn't really let him know what was going on, and he ended up getting 14 years of labor out of him for the 2 daughters versus getting paid, right? So then it goes on. So let's see. Let's get past there. So we go into Jacob's children. So we know Jacob had a lot of kids. He had 13 children. That when he was given the wives, he was also given what they would call the slave girls for the wives. So he not only got the wives, but he got the I don't know what they would call them, but the head slave girl of that particular daughter as well. So he had all these different women coming in, and he ended up having 4? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. He had children by 4 different women, all right, and a total of 13 children altogether. From Leah, he had Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Dinah. From Rachel, he had Joseph and Benjamin, and that would have been his 2 wives. And then Zilpah and Bilhah were the slave girls. Then he actually had Gad, Asher, Dan, and Naphtali from them as well. And on your sheet, I actually have it in order for you. So you can see when, that wasn't like he had these kids with this woman and then he went to this woman and had these kids. He was just having kids. It was all over the place. He was growing a nation. So, and he had 13 children. All right. I don't even know how he did it. That's a lot of kids. It just is. That's a lot of kids. So he has all these kids, right? And he's living in this land, and Jacob's flock begins to increase, right? He's starting to have all these kids. And when you start to have, in that time, when you have 13 children and they start growing up and they start to have children of their own, a town starts to form at that size, right? And so after Rachel gave, I'm going to, I'm in chapter 30 now. I skipped ahead a little bit. And we're going to be in verse 25 in chapter 30. I'm sorry to go so quick, but it's just there's so much. Hopefully it'll give you an opportunity. I don't give you everything. It gives you an opportunity to go home and study it too. So you're from a family of 14? Yeah, so you guys have your own little nation when you have a family that size, right? I mean, if you have 14 kids and they all get married and they all have 2 kids, I mean, look how you're doubling up. Had 10. Wow. So they really have a whole nation. They probably have a whole city taken over somewhere. You know, that was the promise given, right? I mean, Abraham was told that his descendants would be numerous beyond the stars, right? And that's got to come out of his kids, which is Jacob and Esau. It's got to come from them. So he's supposed to be having a bunch of kids. All right, so in verse 25 it says, excuse me, after Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me on my way so I can go back to my homeland." Now, so he's done having kids. He's done what he's done. It's over. He's worked all of his time. He spent all his time. He figures maybe Esau has calmed down a little bit. You know, maybe I can go back to my own land, right? Well, think about how much time has gone by and how much work that Laban's got out of Jacob and all the things that have taken place. Laban doesn't want him to leave. He doesn't want him to go anywhere. He wants to stay there. He's like, "You've been making me money. You're a hard worker. Your family's done well here. You know, you are helping us to be successful. So I don't want you to go anywhere." And he basically says, "Name your wages and I'll pay them. Whatever you want, I'll give you if you just promise you won't leave." Who knows what happens next? Anybody? What's he asked for? So he says, Jacob said to him, "You know I have worked for you, and how your livestock has fared under my care. I'm really good at taking care of livestock." And look how well they've increased. "The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now, when may I do something for my own household?" He's like, "Look, I'm making you money. I'm building your family. When can I do that for myself? I want to do that for myself." So Laban comes back and he asks us, "Well, what shall I give you?" He said, "Don't give me anything," Jacob replied, "but if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them." He says, "Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, and every spotted or speckled goat. They will be my wages." So I'm going to take all the imperfect ones, right? The ones that aren't perfect. I'm going to take all of those, and we're going to make those part of my flock. That's what you can do for me. Right? They will be my wages, and my honesty will testify for me in the future. Listen to that. My honesty is going to testify for me in the future, right? "Whenever you check on the wages you have paid me, any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or any lamb that is not dark colored, will be considered stolen." So we're going to divide the flocks. All right? On this side, we're going to put all the ones that are unblemished. On this side, we're going to put all the ones that are blemished. And if you ever come over to my land and you see one of these sheep or goats or whatever, and they are unblemished, that means I've stolen it from you. It's not mine. I haven't earned it, right? "Agreed," says Laban. "Let it be as you have said." That same day he removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, all the speckled or spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark-colored lambs, and he placed them in the care of his sons. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flocks. Jacob, however, remember what he said about honesty. All right, this is going to be a testament to my honesty. Listen to what I'm saying, my testament to my honesty. Jacob, took fresh-cut branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees and made white stripes on them by peeling the bark and exposing the white inner wood of the branches. Then he placed the peeled branches in all the watering troughs so that it would be directly in front of the flocks. When they came to drink, when the flocks were in the heat and they came to drink, they made it in front of the branches. And when they bore young that were streaked or speckled, spotted, Jacob set apart the young of the flock by themselves and made the rest of them made the rest face the streaked and dark-colored animals that belonged to Laban. Thus he made separate flock for himself and did not put them with Laban's animals. Whenever the stronger females were in heat, Jacob would place the branches in the troughs of the front of the animals so they would mate near the branches. If the animals were weak, he would not place them there. So the weak animals went to Laban, and the strong ones went to Jacob. In this way, the man grew exceedingly prosperous and came to his own large flocks and maidservants and men servants and camels and donkeys. So, yeah, he didn't take anything that didn't belong to him, but he definitely manipulated the situation to make sure he got the best. He made sure that he was going to only get certain ones, that he was going to be able to grow his with the strongest, and Laban was going to get the weakest ones. Now, someone said earlier, what was Jacob good at doing? He was good at what? Running. Isn't that what you said? He's good at running. And that's what he does, right? He runs. He takes off. He flees. In chapter 31, it says, Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, Jacob is taking everything from our father, everything our father owned, and has gained all this wealth from what belonged to our father. And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude towards him was not what it had been. Laban's starting to notice that something's happening, something's going on, and his attitude is starting to change towards Jacob. Then the Lord said to Jacob, go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. So Jacob sends word to Rachel and Leah to come out of the fields where his flocks were. He said to them, I see that your father's attitude towards me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I've worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. If he said, the speckled ones will be your wages, then all the flocks gave birth to speckled young. And if he said, the streaked ones will be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked young. So God has taken away your father's livestock and has given them to me. So he's taken off, right? So he's getting ready to take off. But here's the thing about Jacob taking off. He's taking Laban's daughters. He's taking a large amount of people and livestock and all this stuff. He's taking it all. He's taking it all with him. He's taking all of the grandchildren. This is Laban, and he's not expecting this. This is everything. This is his whole heritage. This is his legacy, is walking away secretly, just taking off. So Laban tracks him down, right? Anybody know what happens with that? About him tracking him down? Anybody? No? All right, well, I'll read it then. That's okay. We'll read it. So Laban, he's pursuing him, right? So on the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. So 3 days had passed, and Jacob was able to get out of there and take off. Taking his relative with him, he pursued Jacob for 7 days and caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. Then God came to Laban, the Aramean, in a dream at night and said to him, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, good or bad. All right, so he's like, basically, God's saying, don't even, just leave it alone. Don't just be careful what you say, right? You have to be real careful here. So Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead when Laban overtook him, and Laban and his relatives camped there too. Then Laban said to Jacob, what have you done? You deceived me. You carried off my daughters like captives in war. Well, they just took off, right? Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me so I could send you away with joy and singing to the music of tambourines and harps? You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You have done a foolish thing. I have the power to harm you, but last night the God of your father, that's what he says, the God of your father, the God of your father said to me, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Now you have gone off because you long to return to your father's house. And here's the thing, I skipped over earlier, but he asked his questions. Why did you steal my gods? And I can't remember if it was Leah or Rachel, because I'd have to go back and look, but one of them went into her father's house and stole all the gods. It was Rachel, and took all the gods and took them with her. And they're searching. They go through all the tents, they look through all this stuff, and I think she's got them hidden under her dress or something, and she says, it's the female monthly time, and I can't stand up, so you can't check me. But they were unable to find any of these gods anywhere. Right? They were just completely gone. So not only did Jacob take his daughters, his grandchildren, his livestock, but he also took his gods and took off with them. He didn't know it, but they still went with him. He's responsible, right? At the end of the day, he's going to hold him responsible at the end of the day for this. All right. So Rachel ends up saying, that she's saying that she can't stand up, that they're looking for these things. They went in Rachel's tents trying to find the gods that were stolen. So Jacob's telling him, I've been with you for this long, and you have prospered. Your daughters have had children. Your name will. It's going to be a legacy. It's going to live on forever because of how God has blessed me and me being with you. Right? So Laban answered Jacob, and this is in verse 43, saying, the women are my daughters, the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine. Yet what can I do today about these daughters of mine, or about the children they have borne? Come now, let's make a covenant, you and I, and let's serve as a witness, and let it serve as a witness between us. So they set up stone and set it up as a pillar, and said to his relatives, gather some stones. So they took stones and piled them in a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jager Sahadutha, and Jacob called it Galeed. Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me. That is why it's called Galeed. It was also called Mizpath, because he said, may the Lord keep watch between you, and may when we are away from each other. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take any wives besides my daughters, even though no one is with us, remember that God is a witness between you and me. So he goes through this, and he goes through these different witnesses and all these things this covenant that they're making, right? So as soon as this covenant's over, early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters, and he blessed them, and then he returned back home. So he left them there, and he went back to where he was living. He's like, all right, we made a covenant. What you did was, what you did to me, I believe is wrong, and he let it all out, and they had this discussion, and they set up this covenant between them, which is extremely important. And Laban kisses his grandchildren and his daughters and blesses them, and then he returns back to his home. So now Jacob is still on his way back to his own home. So there's someone there that he's going to have to confront and talk to. His brother. And I don't know, it doesn't tell us if he's heard any word from his brother. He doesn't know if his brother's still in this fit of fury and rage and anger, and he wants to still murder him, or if maybe if it's subsided and he's kind of calmed down. So that's why he prepares to go see him. So Jacob sends some messengers ahead of him in chapter 32. We see he sends them ahead into the land in the country of Edom, which is his country, and he instructs them. He says, this is what you are to say to my master Esau. Now listen, he says, this is what you are to say to my master Esau. So he's humbling himself a little bit in this situation. And he says, your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban and have remained there till now. I have cattle and donkeys, sheep and goats, manservants and maidservants. Now I am sending this message to my Lord, that I may find favor in his eyes. So he's like, all right, I'm going to humble myself. I'm letting him know, look, hey, I'm his servant. I have all this with me, and I want to find favor in his eyes, in my brother's eyes. After all of this, I want to come back to him, right? And so the messengers returned to Jacob, and they said, we went to your brother Esau, and now he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him. I don't know, if I was Jacob, I'd be a little concerned, because I don't have 400 men. I got cattle, and I have 13 children, and he's sending 400 men out there to meet me, right? I might be a little bit nervous. And it says, in great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into two groups. So he was afraid. He knew these 400 were coming. He was super afraid. And he divided them up. I don't know why you would divide them, but, okay, he divided them. I thought it'd be better if it was a full group, but there was purpose. So he divides them up, and the flocks and the herds and camels as well. So he divided everything. He thought if Esau comes and attacks one group, the other group can escape. That was his idea.
Important ones, which were his children and
Yeah.
grandchildren,
Yes.
to the rear, so they wouldn't get hurt.
Exactly. So he pulled a David in a sense, not the fact that he had a wife and he sent but he did. He's like, all right, you guys go out there and face the 400. I'm going to keep the more important people back here. We're going to split us up. Because if he's coming to kill us, at least we'll have an opportunity to run. I don't have to run. I don't got to be faster than them. I just need to be faster than you. Is essentially what he's saying, right? So all right, so that takes place. So they divide him up. Then Jacob prayed, "O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives. I will make you prosper. All right? So here's the thing. I told you that it was impossible to do this entire lesson in 45 minutes because we're already out of time. But there's a lot more here. So what I'm going to encourage you to do, because there's a lot more that takes place, and what's really pivotal in this story is when Jacob wrestles with God and he becomes Israel. And you need that part to understand. And you need to go even further than that, and you need to see Jacob with his son Joseph and the blessing that he gives Joseph's sons as he leans over his walking cane. That's where his faith, that's where he makes it to the Hall of Fame of Faith. So I can't give you all of it, but at least you have a little bit more about Jacob. If you didn't know some of these things about him, now you do. But it also should inspire you to go and read more about him because his story is extremely important. It really sets the course of our faith. It really is going to, at the end, you're going to see where, how connected Jacob was to Jesus, even though it's not, there's much time span between the two. Yeah, so up to Genesis, if you read up to Genesis chapter 32, you're going to get the full story of Jacob and how he wrestles with God and how he touches him in the socket there, and now he walks with a limp. I thought it was funny. I stepped on a piece of glass and I've been walking with a limp for a day, so it was funny. I kind of related that a little bit. But he, you're going to see how that happens. You're going to see when he actually comes and meets his brother. You're going to see there's more things that are going to take place that guide Jacob into, who he becomes later on in life. But those are important. So I wish I had 2 weeks, but I don't. Yeah, I think it's chapter 32, up to Genesis chapter 32. Yes, sir.
You want to see an interesting way of how history repeats itself, chapter 39.
Okay.
Chapter 39 deals with Jacob's son, Judah,
Yep.
and 2 or 3 of his grandsons. And again, twins being born, the color red is involved.
Yep.
The one starts to go out first. It's just interesting in the Hebrew there, according to a friend of mine who studies those things, is almost identical.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is, what the color of lentil soup would be? Interesting, huh? That's an interesting point. It all ties together. And if you take the time to study and read it and kind of try to connect those dots, you see how they tie together. Yes, Kelly, last question. Comment. Yeah.
He's blessing his grandsons, and you
Yes.
see another little hints of the past.
It skips around a little bit, and there's some more stories in between, but all the way through, you can get all the way to 40. It's 48. Yeah. He leads an interesting life. Like I said, it plays out like an Old Testament soap opera sometimes. I mean, just the way that the level of things that take place in there. It's interesting.